Hey there, my name's Adrian. Welcome back. Last time we left off with talking about our plugin API benchmark and integrating that with Groundhogg and your other custom services that you might be using, or your custom plugins or your custom theme. And it's a great way to be able to start funnels with some sort of custom action or custom trigger within your WordPress setup. However, that doesn't necessarily cover doing something custom or having some sort of custom action within a funnel that can be part of the general automation. And that's what we're going to cover in this episode. So if you want to learn how to create a custom action with Groundhogg, stick around and we'll get into that. All right, so let's jump in to creating our custom action for Groundhogg. You might want to be doing this if you want to integrate with some sort of third-party service or maybe some sort of SaaS program that we don't already offer an integration for, or maybe doesn't work with webhooks, or if you want to do some funny stuff with custom fields. We are going to use an example of modifying custom fields within the funnel at specific instances within our funnel, and that's what we're going to be doing today. So if that sounds of interest to you, you're going to want to watch all of this all the way to the end. So what you're going to need as a prerequisite for this video, for this explanation, is Groundhogg. Obviously, you're going to want to have that installed, and you're going to need to be a moderately experienced either WordPress plugin developer, PHP developer, or if you've developed with Groundhogg before, then you're going to find this super easy. If all of those things sound super weird or unfamiliar, or you're not familiar with PHP at all, this is probably not the episode for you. And you might want to look into using our Webhooks instead, which is also a great no-code developer tool that we offer. But for those of you who want to get a little bit more advanced, for those of you who want to get your hands dirty with Groundhogg development, this is by far the best way to do it because our plugin API benchmarks and actions are guaranteed backwards compatible. So if there's no custom UI you have to do, there's no real any hassle or any worries that you have to have about future Groundhogg updates. These are guaranteed backwards compatible for all of eternity, which makes them a super safe integration point for your project. Okay, so that's the groundwork, that's the context. Let's jump in to developing with our plugin API action. So last time we did the plugin API benchmark. If you haven't seen that, go watch that. It also adds some great context. Now we're doing the action. So you want to use the action when you're doing something with a contact, or you're modifying the contact, or you're sending data somewhere. Conversely, the benchmark is when something happens with a contact record that we want to start a funnel, for example. So our plugin API action, very similar to the benchmark we have here, is we have an action that we want to hook into, and then we have some example code underneath that setting there. And you can copy this and paste that into your theme or your themes functions.php file, or you can just paste it into your custom plugin that you are using or developing with. What I'm going to be doing is hopping over to my IDE, where I already have my sample code sort of ready to go. This file, as well as the previous episode's benchmark implementation, has been uploaded to GitHub. Link is below, so you can go ahead and you can copy that and you can use that for reference. This is actually a valid plugin file, so if you can modify this to your heart's content and actually just upload it straight to your WordPress site, obviously you're going to want to make the modifications that are relevant to your implementation of this tool. So let's head back over to here for a second, because what we need to do first is we need to define an action that we actually want to hook into. So I'm going to call it, what am I going to call it? I'm going to call it add one to custom field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the value of a custom field in the contact record by adding one to it every time that this. So it's kind of like a custom counter implementation for custom fields. That's what I'm going to do. I can go ahead and update that, and you'll notice that the actual sample code here gets updated with the action that you want to do. So let's head over to our IDE. I'm using PHP Storm. You can use whatever the heck you want. And I am going to quickly hop back over here and because I forgot to copy that, I'm going to head over here and I'm going to paste that. You'll notice that I'm actually using add filter, not add action. That's because with this setup, you can actually modify the return value to trigger different responses within the automation. And I'll explain that a little bit. Then you want to enter the field or the function name of whatever the handler function that you're going to use for this implementation. I just have it set to my custom action. You may want to use a different name. And then very, very, very important, the add filter takes 2 extra arguments, a priority and the number of arguments that get passed to the handler function. You have to have this set as 2 because we're passing 2 arguments, and I'll explain what those arguments are. And then the priority I had set to 10, which is just the default. You can set that to 1, you can set that to 99. You can actually hook multiple handler functions into this one filter. It'll run them all and do all of the filters or actions that you have associated with the plugin API action in the funnel. So that's kind of interesting. So if you wanted to have multiple ones, you wouldn't necessarily have to add additional plugin API actions. You just have to hook into the same one with multiple filters. So that's a little bit of a nice feature there. Okay, moving down to the actual handler function, I've made a big deal about you have to have this 2 there because we're passing 2 arguments to the handler function. The first argument is success, which is a variable which is either a Boolean value, true or false, or it can be a WP error. And we're also passing our second argument as the contact record. So the reason this first value is actually a true or false or error is because we can return a WP error to stop the funnel, and in the logs it'll actually show that error. So if something goes wrong with your custom action, you can actually get information about what went wrong, which is kind of nice. So if you return a WP error from this function, that'll actually show up in the logs, which is kind of nice. If you return a falsy value, that means that the action didn't run, but it is skipped, and then the automation can continue. If you return true, that just means all went well, and it'll show up in the logs as this action completed successfully. So depending on what you return from this function, it modifies how Groundhogg reacts to it for preceding steps. So at the beginning of our function, we're doing if success is false, or not success, so some sort of falsy value, we are going to just return that falsy value so we can exit out of that function because we know from a previous instance that we're not supposed to continue. By default, the first thing that's going to enter the filter process is true. So this will, on the first iteration or the first function that's hooked into the handler, that'll be true. So no worries there. Following up with that is we're doing, or if it's a WP error and we're testing the success, then we're just going to return that WP error anyway. And any other handlers should follow that pattern just to make sure that we're not doing things that we don't want to be doing. And then we get to do our code, right? This is where we want to actually write the action that we want to do. As I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do is we're just going to do some custom field modification. We're going to add 1 to our custom field. So we're going to say our value, our field value, our custom field value is equal to contact, which we know is a contact record. We are going to do get meta, and we are going to just say our custom field, and we are going to then just take the absent value of that. We're just going to say we know it's an integer and we know it's a positive integer. Those are the things that we assume. If custom field is not defined, it's going to return false, and then the absent of false is just 0. So that's going to work out just fine. And then we are going to do value plus equals 1. We're adding 1 to our value, and then we are going to update it. Value. That's super easy. So now in our funnel, when this filter is called from the action, add one to custom field, it's going to trigger this handler function. We are going to update the value of said custom field, and then we are going to return true, which is going to signal to Groundhogg and to our funnel that everything went perfectly and we can continue on in the funnel without interference. This is a super powerful feature for developers to be able to create really sophisticated actions without having to deal with the complexities of actually registering custom steps in Groundhogg, which is a fairly simple process, but has just a few more headaches, and then you have to deal with UI. And if you don't want to deal with that, this is definitely a much easier way to go. It's backwards compatible guaranteed, so you don't have to worry about updates in the future of Groundhogg conflicting with whatever you've written here. And it's just a much better way to develop with Groundhogg. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, the Groundhogg Plugin API Action. Just as a recap, got to have the advanced features extension for Groundhogg. You can plug in the Plugin API Action step into your funnel, give it a name which you can then add a filter to, with a priority of 10 and the number of arguments being 2, very important. Set up your handler function. The first argument is success, the second one is contact. And then if not success or it's a WP error, then you return out, and then you can do your code, and then you return true. And that is how to do that. So if you have questions, pop those in the comments below. We're going to be monitoring them, and we'll do our best to make sure that you get an answer. If you haven't yet, go back and watch our plugin API benchmark implementation overview. That is going to give you a great overview of how to do basically this, but with benchmarks. So when something happens on your website, you can trigger a custom benchmark on your website with whatever other plugins that you happen to be using, or your own custom plugins. Very cool, and there's actually the code for that down here. Speaking of this code, this is getting uploaded to GitHub. You can download it from there. Link in the description below. And if you have any issues with it, you can post an issue on GitHub, or again, leave a comment down below. Thanks, I hope you found this really useful. My name has been Adrian. Have a great day.